Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you had a very good coffee and networking break. I hope you made some very good business connections that would help you and your company in near future. The next session is transformation with a purpose. Are you investing in tech for the sake of it? For this particular session, I would like to invite Mr. Yuri Misnik, the Group Chief Technology Officer of First Abu Dhabi Bank. Yuri has the responsibility for driving group's technology and transformation strategy to ensure that FAB is ready for the next generation of digital banking services. Yuri has over 21 years of experience in technology at HSBC, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, and the National Australia Bank, having worked in London, Melbourne, Singapore, and now the UAE. Before joining FAB, he served as the Executive General Manager for the National Australia Bank, one of Australia's leading banks. Yuri, I welcome you on board at the DigiBank UAE Summit, and I hope you have a very good session. You can share your screen now, and if you need anything, I'm right here. You can just shout out, and I'll be.
Thank you, Mitsu. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great event, and I'm just trying to share my screen. So I want to spend another 20 minutes talking about the transformation and sort of an interesting place which mixes between technology transformation and organizational transformation, especially from the perspective of the financial services. And I would start very simply with a few sort of interesting facts. First of all, we all know that the world is changing very fast, and technology is moving this change. And so some interesting facts about what's happening in the moment. So in terms of the capacity of computing capacity, so the Moore's law still exists, and sort of we're doubling the capacity every 2 years. Have huge amount of data generated. It's an interesting fact that 90% of all existing data in the world has been produced just in the last 2 years. We have much faster connectivities across pretty much the whole ecosystem. And if you think about 5G and how fast and how quickly you can access to video and data-rich services, and obviously AI and data. So how are we driving the evolution of compute through machine learning and AI services? And it impacts everyday's life and everyday sort of everyday's life of the banks as well. And if you think about that technology change, as also people are rethinking, and this technology are enabling new different models. You know that very well-known examples like Uber or Airbnb, Alibaba, and obviously big e-commerce giants like Amazon. But in financial services, we had a large momentum of new companies completely unknown in the future, in the previous world, coming in and capturing the large market share, the large part of our life cycle, large part of the engagement. And we in banking and in traditional banking understand that if we don't change fast, if we don't grasp this technology as this key enabling differentiator, we'll definitely be left behind. And that's something which pretty much I've been focusing on for the last 5-6 years in different organizations. We know that technology is a key enabler, but to make it effective, there's a few things need to change in the organization. Right. And if you think about traditional banks and how we are changing now, is that before technology was always sitting in an order-taking part of the table. So effectively, the business decides something, they capture customer needs, then they go to technology teams and say, please build this. And you go back and forth, and then you build something, and then 6 months later, 9 months later, the business comes back and say, oh, actually, we want something else. So realistically speaking, if we want to compete, if we want to use all this advancements of technologies which we have, if we want to drive better customer engagement and actually be responsive, the one thing which is absolutely happening is business and technology need to be running together. And it's an easy way to say, because if you think about the traditional organizations which years and years and decades of history and decades of politics and decades of processes which are built differently, how do you actually make it happen? So one thing we are doing right now, and one thing I've seen quite successful, and we're doing currently in First Abu Dhabi Bank, is actually creating this concept of the services teams, cross-functional services teams, empowered to make decisions fast based on agile principles, and we'll talk about them in a moment, which effectively incorporates three big pillars. Incorporates the business, something which owns the product, traditional product ownership roles, incorporates technology, sort of people who are actually drive technological decisions and technology ownership, and incorporates delivery. That means, orchestration, alignment, sort of maybe think about the program management or product management type of things. And the important thing is that these cross-functional teams, they can also include lots of other different people and lots of other different functions. But these three pillars, the three key owners, they effectively have shared responsibility. They can succeed together or they can not succeed together. It's not individual wins there, but they also have very clear accountability to drive this. And effectively, this unit, the services teams unit, creates a really good way of good structural unit or cell, which allows to move fast, which has ownership of their decisions, that can iterate, and they can also own end-to-end delivery. And when we're talking about the services teams and the service delivery model, it has actually these two components, which I just mentioned, maybe a bit more details here. One is cross-functional composition. Each service team encompasses everyone who they need to deliver successfully. And it doesn't mean dedicated people. It could be people who are actually, are part of, is only part-time of their job is part of the service team. You have somebody from legal, you can have somebody from compliance, but they also have people who are fully dedicated to the service team, whether it's in architecture, whether it's engineers, whether it's a product owners. But it's also they want to operate agile. And when we talk about agile, the key point here is not about the processes. It's not about Scrum or rituals. It's actually very simple. It's about mindset. And it's about the mindset of being able to start working without having all the answers and be prepared to evolve. How you do that, it doesn't matter. You can use an official, safe methodology across your organization. You can use extreme programming. You can use Scrum. But doesn't matter. The reality here is that if your team is set up and it's prepared to iterate and prepared to evolve as they continue, they will be able to succeed. They will be able to adjust, and they will be able to drive this customer mentality. So effectively, a big thing behind any technology transformation is actually not technology by itself, is enabling the new delivery model from our perspective, based on the services teams, based on these units of work. And doesn't have to be the two pizza model. And in many places, especially in the large banks, you cannot have it as small enough. You still have quite a meaningful sized teams. But these teams are fully equipped to do things end to end. And these things have a mindset of agility in them. That means driving work without having all the answers and prepared to change. And sort of how do we sort of bring it up together? So effectively, that's the two things, right? If you have a customer need on the top, and I think this is a really good slide, which we're using a lot in our bank to communicate, how the new world of technology is supposed to work, right? It is cross-functional team on one side, with dedicated roles, with product owners, with architects, technology, security, etc. Operating on an agile iterative mode, fast releases where possible, meaningful release. And we're not talking about 1 week or 2 weeks. It could be still a meaningful release cycle, but making sure we can iterate, have a version of product, go to the market, get some feedback, iterate, and continue with it. So these two bits and pieces. And then the bottom part of it, realistically, there's three things which we believe are absolutely critical for any technology transformation, any technology organization who is looking forward, not backwards. One is using platform tools and services, building technology platforms, building an API gateways, building data lakes, building things which are reusable and allow you to sort of be consistent, whether it's deployment pipelines, whether it's configuration management, whether it's the data lake and the way you treat with data. So building this technology platforms, running on the cloud, we absolutely do believe that the only way for current organization business to actually go ahead with technology or be ahead with technology is to be on the cloud. And we're talking about what type of cloud or which vendor to use, but not focusing on doing heavy lifting, which you don't have to do. Not focusing on running your infrastructure, because that's not where the value for your customers are, right? So running on the cloud, and also making sure you have an architecture governance underneath. So in many cases, sort of we still haven't learned how to transition from a traditional enterprise architecture mindset when you have a separate team of enterprise architects in the organization, which which makes all the decisions. In our model, we're moving architecture decision making much stronger into this cross-functional teams, so they're empowered to make their decisions, but effectively having a little bit of a governance framework which allows us to have consistency in decisions and allows us to have focus and a bit of cross-pollination of knowledge across the organization. And if we do this sort of two front-facing elements and sort of three pillars, non-invisible part of the iceberg, right? Technology platform, running on the cloud, and architecture governance, it allows you to effectively deliver the business outcomes. And one big thing which we've learned and which we've absolutely committed to is that we don't do technology for the sake of technology. Technology has to drive specific business outcomes and specific business services, whether it's a customer-centric value proposition, whether it's time to market, whether it's access to data, whether it's employee engagement, anything like that. Of course, there is an element of technology debt and cost and operational elements of it, but they should be taken care as part of your platform services and as part of this sort of continuously optimizing cycle, which you run within your tech organization. So we were thinking a lot how to actually create this elements of things to explain to the business and to explain to a normal person person who is not a developer, who is not an engineer, of how this whole technology thing fit together, right? And we came up with an analogy sort of very similar to a car manufacturing. So you have, if you look at the bottom of the slide, right? If you build a car, you set up a factory, you build some foundational components, then you design sort of your car, your platform architecture, etc., and then you configure your car from a set of meaningful components, or from the catalog. Effectively, you use your production line to put these components together, and you have your end product. And effectively, the way we're looking at the technology service in the bank right now is very similar. So we have these three elements of infrastructure set up. This is your factory setup, your basic compute, storage, networking, operations, monitoring, etc. It's something which has to be done well, and that's where the cloud plays a massive role. Then a platform services, so technology platform services, where you have components which you can reuse, whether it's sort of things like API gateways or monitoring or dashboarding tools, or whether it's some security components or end user components, frameworks and elements. So these are your tech platform bits. And then you have your solution design architecture. Then you talk about how do you want particular services to be built, what are the basic principles, how do you want to put your wheels of your car together, where they should sit, etc. That's your architecture. And then effectively, what happens after that is that the services team, this cross-functional service model, cross-functional service team goes in, has an ability to pick up majority of the services from a service catalog, right? Majority of the platform services from a service catalog, or infrastructure services from a service catalog, bring it up together and run it. So effectively getting away from building the same things many times. The biggest challenge here for us is that a lot of the products which we use in the banking services are still driven by vendors. And we don't want to build everything, we want to buy things in places where we don't believe that there is a big innovation, where we believe that we can actually have a commodity product. And we're still waiting for our vendors and product suppliers. So large companies like, I don't know, Finastra, FIS, Temenos, and system integrators underneath them, to come up with the products which sort of fit this mentality, which products which can be composable, the products which are componentized well, and the products which run natively on the cloud and use natively this platform infrastructure services. We definitely see some leaders in this space. We definitely see where people are coming and products are coming up in a much better way, much more native to a cloud technology stack, much more native to the modern technology stack. But it's still a big journey for us, and I think that's where the biggest challenge for the banking industry still exists, especially for the traditional banks. So if we go towards the sort of summary slide, and this is my last slide here, when I want to talk about how Fab is approaching transformation. So essentially, that's summarized it on one slide. So when we think about technology transformation, we have two important parts here. One is your invisible bits, the technology bits, infrastructure, cloud, platform, architecture, governance, everything which you need to run this stuff, but absolutely critical for us. And we do have a absolutely alignment with the business here, is that this visible part of it, which is business focused, customer focused things. So service delivery models, service delivery structure, organizing the teams, organizing the business, and organizing every function in the bank for success in a cross-functional teams, and the ways of working where you go away from, write a 300-page requirements document into create a backlog, start working on the backlog, and adjust as much as you go forward. And by doing this, we see lots of values to us, lots of values to the bank. It allows us to be much more nimble, much more reusable, and much more optimized from the cost perspective. It allows us much more faster time to market. Using this approach, I'll give an example. One of our mobile applications, we used to have one release a quarter. Now we're pretty much doing a weekly deployment, so the weekly new features are coming to the market. For our mobile app, we're doing similar stuff with other elements of our technology stack, right? And again, we focus a lot of these things, a lot of the thinking drives automation. So if you think about the platform, we effectively, the fundamental element of our platform mindset is no manual work. So everything we do is infrastructure as code, is deployment as code, it's automation. We don't have manual controls. We're moving away from any manual work, whether it's a security controls or governance controls or ITSM controls. And effectively, it drives a lot of costs out of our organizations. And also the same approach goes to the business. So we're focusing on automation with the business and everything which we drive. It also facilitates the use of the data across all the processes, because as you start building the APIs, as you start building the automated way of connecting things together, you naturally have access to data points across all your processes. Capturing this data in a data lake environment and using them provides a big benefit for us. And also it helps our employees to work well. So technology teams love operating this way. Business now feels that they're not just writing asking for something wonderful and then waiting for 2, 3, 4, 6 months to when it comes. They believe they're part of the process, and we have a much more cohesive teams who are fully vested on achieving success. So again, finalizing my thoughts is that if you are doing technology transformation, obviously start with the business, but an absolutely critical part of it is it's getting the right technology principles set up, and there are 3: cloud, platform, and architecture governance around it, and also focusing on the service delivery model and service delivery structures and the mindset and principles of work. On this, I will finish. Thank you very much, and I think, Mitsu, if we have time for any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate your presentation. And we do have time for questions. Let me just check. And I wanted to personally congratulate you for such a nice presentation, because this has been one of the most innovative and interesting presentations that we have had today. So let me just check for some questions, and let me just check. All right. So the first question that we have is, do you see the functional roles of banking heads evolve in the course in their closer collaboration with CTOs and CIOs?
I definitely see that. It's hard to say whether the banking heads roles have evolved, but we definitely see that the conversations and the accountabilities are becoming much more merged together. For example, we do have now a shared responsibility for the digital parts of the journeys between technology and the business. So effectively, we do have much more shared accountability, also shared responsibility between operations and technology in automation and cost management. So one thing which I definitely see is happening is that the traditional functional bank heads or head of banking, right, becoming much more of a product owners. And technology becomes an enabler for these products to be built and distributed. So one thing which I definitely see that the product ownership element of the banking job is growing. There's massive gaps there, and we definitely want more people with a great product ownership skills coming from either traditional software companies or more of a sort of product companies coming in.
All right. Okay. The next question that we have is, how are your EA and digital tech teams collaborating?
Good, wonderful. This is a great question, because and I wrote an interesting post in about a year ago in terms of, does enterprise architecture have a life in sort of this new modern world? So we have, and we are sort of essentially establishing a very small team of enterprise architects, mostly focusing around governance and consistency, right? And our architecture is actually embedded in the technology functional teams, in this cross-functional services teams, as we discussed, as I presented. We are not going to the extreme of, let's say, Amazon, which doesn't have architects at all, where sort of the consistency of practice is driven by the community of principal engineers. But we do have dedicated roles. We have service owner architects, we have service architects, we have domain architects who look at, for example, retail business or on a corporate business or some of the operational. But we want these people to be much more practical and much more real in terms of understanding how things work, and having much more ownership about the quality of service, of technical depth, rather than just sort of being this isolated ivory tower. So we still do have a little bit of governance, and we want to have this governance. That means architecture review board still runs, and it's still governed by the enterprise architect. But the decision powers are mostly incorporated into the technology teams, into the cross-functional services teams.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Yuri. Thank you for the fabulous presentation and answering the questions. The delegates, if you have any more questions, please feel free to write it in the question and answer tab, and we will check with Yuri and we will answer the questions. And Yuri, I hope you have a very good day, and thank you for being a part of Kalish Times Digibank, the UAE edition. And thank you very much once again, all the delegates. I hope you attend the next session, which is going to be API and BFSI, helping you survive and thrive in a digital environment, by Mr. Sanjay Khanna, the Chief Information Officer for RAK Bank. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitsu. Thank you, Mitsu.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.